Hi, this is Ask Auntie Tam here, and once again we are on the topic of depression. I would just like to reiterate from as you may know, I am not a psychologist or a doctor. So everything that I am telling you comes from my own experience. It's not medical advice. If you do find that you do feel that you may be experiencing depression, I strongly advise that you do go and visit your physician or your GP, and have them assess you and have a look at what's going on, because this is a very treatable disease, but if left untreated, it could be deadly. So please do make sure that you go and see your psychiatrist or your doctor. Before I begin with this video, I'm issuing a trigger warning. There will be mentioning of suicide. So please, if you are feeling that this may trigger you, skip the video. It's cool. So today, before I go into what the causes of depression are, I'd just like to run through once again the symptoms, because I feel like I've left a few out in the last video. So psychological symptoms, which would be a very deep depression that doesn't, or deep sadness, feeling of despair, which just doesn't dissipate or move on. Lack of motivation, feeling like you can't get out of bed, lack of wanting to do anything that used to be really special to you, or something that you used to enjoy, any of your hobbies. As I said before, for me that was karate and reading. A lack of interest in personal hygiene, lack of interest in anything really, a general sense of foreboding or dread. Also, part of that would be suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, um, planning of suicide, thoughts of death and dying, which are also part and parcel of that. Physically, you may also experience physical symptoms, which can range anywhere from backache and headaches to stomach aches. Also, low sex drive. Your sex drive basically evaporates. You feel like you have absolutely no desire. You may find also physically some sleep disturbances. Either you want to sleep more, or you find you have some insomnia, or maybe a combination of the two. You may find yourself more hungry than usual, or you might find that you have absolutely no appetite whatsoever. And so you'll see that maybe there'll be a gain or loss of weight. But mentally, you feel like you cannot concentrate, you have a lack of focus, you become unproductive at work, you become withdrawn, you don't feel like you want to hang out with people, you feel a bit antisocial, you don't want to be around people. So all of these things are things that I have actually experienced in my journey with depression. Um, I won't go into great detail of these symptoms, how they relate to me specifically, because that's not what we are here to talk about today. One of the things that I want to mention today is the actual why people experience, or what happens, what causes depression. And the very first thing I want to mention is genetics. Um, it's often passed down, and recently I had a very interesting conversation with a doctor about epigenetics. Now, I don't know enough about the subject to talk about it, so I will inform myself and educate myself before I do a video about that. But there is a theory that you can be born with a serotonin deficiency because of past trauma that your ancestors may have experienced in their lifetime. So, but genetically, there is a very strong genetic component in many cases of depression. So we've got genetics. Then we've got physical injury to the brain. So a brain injury can re- just completely erupt into a depression, be part of the brain injury. There are other things that go with brain injury. There are other mental disorders that can be triggered by a brain injury. I cannot speak to those, but I can speak to depression. I have been in car accidents where I've had a whiplash injury and a concussion, and in even just the whiplash injury. and the concussion, because remember, brain and nervous system is all connected. We'll go into that in another video as well. So the whiplash injury and concussion together. And I found within 12 hours of that accident and those injuries, I was experiencing a very severe depression. And I went through to the doctor. I also went through to the chiropractor, got that sorted, and it seemed to help the problem. So genetics, physical injury to the brain, chemical injury to the brain as well. If you are abusing recreational drugs or prescribed drugs, that could also create a brain injury, which then leads on to depression. We've also got experiencing trauma or a tragic event, which can then lead on to severe depression. Stress is a big one. So if you're stressed at work, stressed at home, that can also lead to it. If we're not just talking also about things and change of events in your life that are tragic, or like, for instance, like a car accident, or like losing your job being terrible. We're also talking about big changes in your life, like getting married, which should actually be a very happy occasion. But the change in your life, oh dear, dogs. But the change in your life can actually lead to some kind of manifestation of depression. I do apologize, dogs. Yes, dogs are my life. Right. So if we're looking at those very, very different things, we've also got grief, that is the loss of someone or something. Grief can also be experienced when you lose a job, when you've had to say goodbye to a car, and when you buy a new one. Yes, as crazy as that. Loss of, or changing your belief system, that kind of thing. There is a grieving process involved, and it can lead to depression. Now, grief, we'll do a video on grief, but grief and depression are, while they seem similar, they're not the same thing. But extended grief you need to go through that sadness. You need to go through that process to say goodbye to the person or the thing that you've lost. But it can manifest later on as depression, which can get quite severe in any of these circumstances. The genetic, the injury, the stress, the trauma, all of that can actually lead to quite severe depression. And a lot of people only seek help when they are at that really rock bottom stage, when they are at that point where they are thinking, well, I shouldn't be thinking about suicide, but I am. And they may only then decide to take themselves off to the doctor, if at all. Because I feel a lot of people are afraid, or they think they'll be judged. There is a lot of stigma attached to mental illness. So if we're talking about that, in my personal experience, I know that my depression, I have a genetic predisposition towards depression, having it running on especially my mother's side of the family, and I believe a little bit on my father's side of the family. So there is a genetic predisposition in my case. We had recently had, we're talking around about, most of last year, but it came to a head in October last year, a traumatic experience. I've also experienced depression that resulted from, as I said before, a car accident, a whiplash, and concussion. And I must say that in each of those cases, especially with the brain, the car accident, that depression felt quite different. What I would also like to say is that depression may come about as a symptom of another disease, or a hormonal imbalance as well. So those are also causes of depression. So I know especially thyroid disease, other illnesses can manifest depression as a symptom. You can also have, if you have a hormonal imbalance, depression manifests as a symptom. Currently, I'm perimenopausal, So as I'm going through that change, depression has become a symptom of the change that I'm going through physically. So let's just recap. You've got genetics. You've got an injury to the brain, which it can be either chemical through drug use or through or physical through an actual accident that compromises the brain in some way. Stress, tragic events or traumatic events, hormonal changes, disease. So we're looking at quite a wide range of things that can trigger depression for you. Now, what do you do? Okay, so if you've been watching this and you're thinking, that sounds like me, the very first thing I would do is actually get myself straight away to a good doctor. Sit down and explain to them your symptoms. That's the first thing you should do. The second thing is to find yourself an understanding and well-qualified counselor. And I'm not talking about somebody you know from the church or somebody you know who's really wise. I'm talking about a qualified professional, a psychologist or a counselor or a psychiatrist, because that will really help for you to start expressing what you're feeling and not hiding what you're feeling. And you might not feel like speaking about it, but there is a strong cathartic thing that happens when you start talking about what you're going through. It doesn't feel great, it feels awful, but it does start to lift. You do start to understand you're not alone. So very first thing, go and see your doctor. Let them do some tests to check to see if there's a hormonal imbalance or if there's an underlying disease or brain injury. Then speak to a counselor. Get yourself somebody who really understands, who's open. Let's talk about what does not cause depression. What does not cause depression is demonic possession. Why am I saying that? Because I have heard a number of times that there is the spirit of depression has entered somebody's body and it needs to be exorcised. No. Depression is a disease. It's an illness. You wouldn't say that to somebody who broke their arm, that the spirit of a broken arm has entered their body. So let's just be very clear that what's happening to a person is not the result of some kind of weird spiritual thing. It is definitely something that is happening as an imbalance in the body, in the brain, with the chemicals in the brain that make you feel good, make you feel motivated, make you feel like you want to do something. Now, I hope you found all of this useful and helpful. And once again, I'm going to say subscribe, click like if you like, leave comments if you want to, and again, put in any questions you want me to take a look at. Even if they're crazy questions, I'll put on my funny hat and answer those for you. Because remember, Ask Auntie Tam is not just about depression, it's also about crazy advice. So let's have some fun if you want and put some crazy questions in the inbox. And let's once again, open the discussion and take the stigma off mental illness. Thank you very much for your time and for taking a listen. Be well.